Welcome to New Wine, where we share faith, extraordinary life stories, and new wine. During this podcast, we will talk openly about pain, death, and the feeling of hopelessness that almost always surrounds addiction. But that isn't why we are sharing this podcast with you today. This episode is more importantly about hope and new beginnings. You will hear incredible life stories of two men and their struggle with addiction and their journey to healing and new life. Thanks for joining us today. Your hosts are Michelle Alexander and Donna Weaver, and our producer and editor is Johnny Summers. All right. Hello, friends. Thanks for listening in to our second New Wine podcast, where we explore faith, extraordinary life stories, and new wine. Today, our guests are Russell Weaver, my charming and tall older brother. Say hello, Russ.
Hello. How are y'all?
Awesome.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, glad you're here. And our dear friend, I'm going to try to pronounce your name, Ghun.
That's perfect. Ghun. It absolutely.
Or affectionately known as Ghun.
Or the Asian for any occasion. My preferred nomenclature, but that's okay. It's all right. You did good.
So, Ghun, tell me about your journey at Miracle Hill and how we met you.
Let's see. I had been at Miracle Hill Overcomer Center in Greenville for 4 months, and I had just rededicated my life to Christ. Like in level 1, so there are levels in the Overcomer program, which is a 7-month faith-based 12-step program, which both Russ and I are graduates of. And
That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Right.
But so I came to Greenville, South Carolina from Colorado on July 9th, and then you folks came to visit on November 9th, which was 4 months later. And I had just probably the week before, while sitting in a classroom, realized that Jesus is real and was real, and that he had been calling me home. So seeing you when I did, knowing one gospel song, which I shared with you guys that night.
What was it?
I think it was Reckless Love.
It sure was.
And it was a version, I had never even heard the song, so I sort of just made my own. And Johnny explained to me later, he's like, that's not even the time signature it's in. I was like, what? Okay. And he's like, but I like what you're doing. You guys, you lifted me up when I really needed it, and it was confirmation that I was on track to something much bigger than myself. So I love you folks, and I just appreciate what you do for everybody. So thanks for coming.
That's one of the things when we go and just go outside the church and just do something, man, I just feel the Spirit so strong. I mean, it's like you just jump right in the flow.
You can feel like the shift in the atmosphere sometimes, and people start to like break open a little bit, and we're pouring out, we're receiving, they're receiving, we're just like sharing with each other, and it's amazing to see their faces, and to be honest, like I love the way Michelle kind of interacts, that the first thing we want to do is say, hey, we are walking this walk too, and we may not have exactly your struggles, but we got our struggles, and Jesus walks with us all, and it's just, it kind of is a level playing ground, that there's no like better or worse kind of thing. We're all on this journey together.
Well, I mean, from the point of view of someone who's at the center or wherever they're at, you get these moments that sort of lift you up and carry you to the next moment. But a lot of the process of going through a rehab center or a long-term program, that the journey is kind of a grind, to be honest. It's really, it's hard, and you're in this bubble and you get tired of the guys. And so when you get a moment like that where you just get so lifted, and you see people, who very much love you and spread the gospel, and you sort of catch fire, you folks are just like a spark that really kind of, gets that flame going. It's an amazing thing, and it'll sort of carry you for a long time until the next thing, until God presents the next thing. So, I mean, you're very much a beautiful gift.
What's amazing, so in recovery, we find out the people that have been praying for us, and all the prayers that, helped me, and so it was neat to see that, and now the relationship me and my sister have, and then getting to know you better.
One of the mantras at the Overcomer Center they teach you, and it's actually from Gordon Lake, is get comfortable being uncomfortable. So that's what they're really trying to do. Whatever we were doing before was not working for you, clearly. So we just have to start getting comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think that's just where real growth probably starts to happen, you know?
It does. I am a graduate of the Overcomer Center 7-month program. And then what I did, I was saved at the program. After that, I got baptized. And Donna came and
Yep,
saw
I was
it.
there. I saw my big brother
Yeah.
in this little bitty tub of water.
So-
I'm telling you, no, I got to tell him the story. It's just
Yeah.
hilarious.
Please
I mean,
do.
so this pastor or whoever was dunking
I
you.
asked, the tallest guy I knew at that church
Yeah.
to baptize me. So
I mean, he had to be big and tall
Yeah.
to dunk my brother. So we're in I mean, this particular church, you could look up and it was over the choir,
it was
right?
way up. Yes,
I know. And like, I'm seeing you up in the sky. And so he dunks you and the water comes out over the edges. And I'm like, oh
You mean
my
like
God.
at SeaWorld? Like where there's like a
Like-
splash
like-
the people down below were filling.
Holy Spirit splash zone? Like you're gonna, this is gonna, don't do it. Yeah.
Oh my God, it was hilarious. Of course, you're gonna get wet.
One of the best days of my life, and everybody felt it on the front
Yeah.
row.
Oh, I
And-
cried like a baby the
Oh,
day.
my
So I
goodness.
got baptized at Rocky Creek. Did you get baptized at Rocky Creek?
Yes.
So I got baptized in the same place as much later. I got baptized this year, January 20th. So I grew up in the church and walked away from it, very clearly when I didn't have the right teachers or mentors or things changed my life around 13, 14. And coming back now and having these men who are sort of like adopted dads and spiritual mentors and these people who are just mature Christians in their walk. And the funny thing about the relationships I'm finding out is I hold them accountable as much as they hold me accountable. I thought it was going to be this thing where they're just telling me, hey, this is what you should be doing. And, it's going to be kind of one direction. But, a relationship, any good relationship goes both ways.
Iron sharpens iron. So
Yeah.
that's the first thing that was when I was in the program, how they were like, iron sharpens iron. I'm like, what are you talking about? I didn't know this scripture. And then you find out, especially when you get up and give your first testimony, you're like, how bad it was, and then that whole I'm out of my comfort zone. But then you step down and say thank you. Somebody says thank you to you. I've been through the same thing, and then all of a sudden there's that sharpening. And there's that, this is okay. So it's amazing.
One of the things that you realize that only God can do with his grace is turn everything that was a mess into a message.
Yes.
All those things that were messed up about me and that I beat myself up about and things that I hated about myself or stories that were guilt and shame ridden.
Yep.
Now those are the very stories that allow me to talk to the guys and they, immediately have a bond with them or immediately have a connection. We have a shorthand that they can tell me things that they can't tell somebody
They have
else.
spent so long judging themselves and assuming that judgment is coming toward them because of their circumstances and their problems. To have someone say, me too, makes a big difference.
Yeah. And, it's
Yeah.
funny is when you're in the middle of trying to figure it out, you overcomplicate it because it's a radical thing for someone to love you so much and offer you this gift that you don't deserve. Like it wasn't yours to have. You didn't do it. There's nothing I could ever do, that's not how it works. You know what I'm saying? And so how do you wrap your brain around that when your whole existence up to this point is like, is about getting on your grind and doing what you got to do and getting on the hustle and, you know what I'm saying? And making things happen and just trying to fill this hole in your heart with these immediate gratifications, you know what I'm saying? So then how do you possibly understand this amount of unconditional, never-ending love that he had for us from the beginning? My favorite Bible verse I learned probably in the entire time I was at the Overcomers is, for we are God's masterpiece, made anew in Christ Jesus to do the good things that he planned for us long ago. And it's just like, what? Yeah,
Yeah.
like what? Like, just mind, like there's so much in that verse. And then I even studied it further when that got me through for a while. Like, oh, I'm God's masterpiece. You're God's masterpiece. Woo. But then I realized it says we are God's masterpiece. So like I'm not God's masterpiece without you, without, you know what I'm saying? How it's plural to plan, to do the good things that he planned for us long ago. And I'm just like, man. My father went to prison when I was in second grade and to the time I was in sixth grade. And so during that time, the way that my mom helped my brother and I get through it is she doubled down on church. She took us to a Korean church and to a Presbyterian church in Colorado Springs. And so we probably went to church 3 or 4 days a week. And so in that time, from second grade to sixth grade, I learned how to sing. You know, they're like, here's your hymn book, practice singing. I learned how to read. Here's your Bible, learn your verses, which continued a thirst for knowledge and education and music and art. I mean, you know, everything that happened at VBS or, you know what I'm saying, started for me in like youth group, you know what I'm saying, handbell choir. I can remember all these things that really shaped who I am today still. And then, you know, I was on this gradual increase of schools, and I was doing well in school. And the minute I decided, okay, we're going to try something else, from the time I was 13 to the time I'm 40, I was just lost. And now that I have Christ back in my life, and I'm just surrounding myself with the right people and making the next right decision. And I mean, everything for me now is, it comes down to two things. Is it pleasing to God, or is it pleasing to Young Gun?
Tell us a little bit about your path with the dark road of addiction.
The dark road of addiction. You know, it starts off innocently enough. I think it was just that in some point of my life, because I had this absence of spirituality and had this absence of something bigger, I was looking for, you know, the bigger. I say often that I'm addicted to more, unfortunately. So I think at a young age, I just learned that there's fun, and then there's drugs and alcohol fun, which is a total lie. You know, I understand now, but I just learned that you could have fun, but in order to get to the next level of really celebration of fun, you had to have drugs or alcohol. So I think that's the real defining line between addiction, is just can you have fun without it? You know, and at some point, very much my life revolved around just waiting to get to that next high, just waiting to get to that next drunk, just waiting to get to that next rave or whatever. I mean, I the funny thing is my story of addiction crosses now, you know, 2 decades, 3 decades almost now, and crosses different substances. I think I'm clinically what they call cross addicted, because I've pretty much experimented and abused everything that's out there. I'm really hoping they don't invent anything new. There's no new temptations out there, but for the most part, in different seasons of my life, I just was addicted to more, you know, just because of that lie of not enough, that lie of not enough. So I just was trying to fill that void. I would say that in the first years out of high school, I was probably drinking. I was probably an alcoholic, a binge drinker. And then from that point on, got into club drugs, whether it be ecstasy or hallucinogens. And I mean, what really sort of became the endless pit was once I moved to Durango, Colorado. There was you know, it's kind of a rural area, but it was they were really battling with methamphetamine. What happens is, in the cycle of addiction, is you start at first with something that becomes sort of attractive, and you're kind of like, it's this wonderful and new euphoric experience. Eventually, it just gets to the point where you're doing it just to feel normal, and beyond just doing it to feel normal, you're just doing it to survive. And at some point, I was probably self-medicating too. I mean, I definitely battle with dual diagnosis that they call mental health issues. I mean, right now, I've got my spirituality in a place that's you know, I'm just so blessed that it's an ongoing thing. I think at some point I will have to, and I'm on a process now of really trying to define my mental health so that I can better steward my recovery. You know, I mean, my recovery now has just become this stewardship, you know, just like anything else. And I'm blessed to have it, and I'm blessed to share it, and I'm blessed to be living in it and you know, prospering in it. But so much of it I have to really take serious, including the mental health part of it. Because I think just for my long-term sobriety, if I don't quite get my mental health in place, there will always be this, and some of it is, some of it is manageable. So I don't know. I mean, I'm really new in recovery. I have had sustained sobriety, maybe not long-term quality sobriety in the past. I did go to what they call a secular rehab. I went to a 90-day program before, and I've sort of dried up. I've been a dry drunk, they would call it, or I mean with drugs, not with drinking, but so I was sort of white-knuckling it, whether it be just dealing with going to jails, institution, or watching people die. And I guess the real turning point for me in my past is the death of my brother. So my brother, he always called addiction his demon. He was always a man of Christ, and always trying to get me to come back to Jesus. I mean, we would spend hours and hours and hours going around and around to the point where I would just be begging him. I'd be like, please, can we just agree to disagree? Or I'm spiritual, I'm not religious. I would have these conversations with him. If God is love, then why would he possibly, be judgmental? And honestly, everything I was saying was just because of the people that I had met in my life. It had nothing to do with Jesus. It had nothing to do with the real gospel, or the love that's in, or the grace that's in the Bible. I think that's the hardest thing to realize, is that you come to the Bible and you come to Christianity with all these preconceived notions of something someone told you, or something you picked up along the way, or some verse that someone mistaught you out of context. I mean, it happens. It really does. And so you really have to spend time figuring out what you believe for yourself, and sort of make sense of that. And I had never done that. And so my brother, he just constantly get me to come back to Jesus. He would just constantly, and he would call addiction his demon, and we were sort of battling it together. And I had just gotten out of this 90-day facility in November of 2014. And then in March of 2015, March 17th, 2015, my mom and I, we found my brother's body. He had died from fentanyl overdose. And it's just really this heavy, heavy memory.
I can imagine.
Yeah, I can remember hearing my mom's voice, and just hearing the way she would call out my brother's name. I knew something had changed. I knew something terrible had happened. And we get up there into the room and we find him, and he just looks like he's sleeping, but he's
gone.
He's gone.
Yeah.
And I remember the longest 8 or 9 minutes of trying to resuscitate him, and the smell of death. And so some of that stuff is like I suffered from post-traumatic stress from, and
Absolutely.
yeah, it's really brutal. It's this terrible thing. And in that moment, with paramedics floating around me and with people going on, I did the one thing I knew my brother would want me to do. I did the one thing that my life had trained me to do, which was to get on my knees over my brother and to pray the most sincere prayer I had ever prayed in my entire life, which is, I don't understand why this is happening, God.
Yeah.
But please, thank you for my brother, and thank you, and please take his soul into heaven, because that's what he believed, and I didn't know, you know what I'm saying? I mean, really true submission, broken.
Yeah.
But that was the moment everything changed in my life. I mean, that was the moment that shook me to my core. The roughest part was afterwards, hearing my mother, 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the morning, in Korean, she'd just be like, "어디가, 영민아, 어디가," which means, where have you gone? Where have you gone? Just hearing the pain in my mother's voice. But what that did was made me understand what God must have felt when he gave his son on the cross. Mm-hmm. It gave me a deeper understanding of his love for me, because I witnessed what it was like for my mom to lose her son. Mm-hmm. And so it rooted me into this like really real, visceral thing that was like, oh my goodness. It's weird how only God can take something that's that. And my sister and I talk about it all the time. If my brother's tragedy, and it has already, I have a shorthand with guys who've lost people, and I have a shorthand with people who suffered from those kind of things in their life, you know, because we everybody, addiction touches everybody's life now.
It does.
It just rolls in like a rhapsody of pain. It's just swallowing the country whole. And anything you can't control, anything you can't stop doing that you're obsessively or compulsively doing is an addiction. Whether it be
Thank
eating,
you so much.
whether it
for
be
saying
eating,
that.
or whether it be just
Mhm.
obsessing about, or if you are a modern day Pharisee and you're
Mhm.
addicted to legalism.
You know, it's
you
so
know?
I love that you say that, because we love to say us and them. And I'm here sitting at a table with you telling you that my addictions may not get me in a rehab facility, but they get me on my knees
Yeah.
and they tear me down. And, so thank you.
Every decision I make has to be, first and foremost, does this keep me safe and does this keep me sober? So before, if I even ask, and I'm hungry, or like I'm thirsty, or like, does this make me happy? The first two questions I always ask myself is, does this keep me safe and does this keep me sober? And it gets easier. It's like, you do something with time and it gets a little easier. But at first it's just awkward and you're like, annoyed that everything has to be seen through this lens, and that you're, but there's such a reward in it. So the reward is, last weekend would have been my brother's 38th birthday, May 4th. And it, first of all, from March 17th to May 4th is just a really tough time. It was a tough time for me for the last 4 years. He passed away in 2015. And this was the first year that from his birthday, or from the day he passed away to his birthday, my sister and I, we stayed in contact the whole time. And we talked through things, and we cried together, we laughed together, and we knew that we had really turned the corner on something. And this last birthday was the first birthday in our entire lives when both of us were drug and alcohol and cigarette free. So she
Beautiful.
quit smoking for one reason or another, and it was honestly the absolute best way to honor my brother. Was
Golly.
that, and that doesn't happen without God. It doesn't.
Yeah, I have to tell you, there is something about Jesus showing up in the dark crevices of our personal circumstances, where he just comes in and goes boom. And I can relate to that because my struggles and past relationships, when things were just breaking all around me, that is the pivotal moment when I started to really feel the presence of God in my life, and his, the change that occurs where you are more connected to your Creator and you are living more for that instead of for yourself. I wish it wasn't, I want to say, to be completely honest, I wish it wasn't that way. I wish that we could have this encounter with God without the pain, but something about pain gets us to a place where we are, I guess, fully surrendered, and we're like, okay, I've done everything I can possibly think of. I can't make this situation any better. My best efforts are failing miserably. I mean, you're kind of in that place where you're looking around and there's nothing but ruins around you. And here comes this amazingly beautiful Savior. And he is welcoming you in his arms, and you are clinging to him in such a way of it's like a child, right?
The main difference I have noticed between the people who are successful in recovery and who are not successful in recovery is the people who are successful are very intentional about what they think, and I think it makes sense because we were very intentional about being addicts. Our whole life, and the type, you know what I'm saying? We were,
It was work.
it was work, and I mean the type of relationships we would have, everything was built around our need for this, substance, and so the people who are intentional about what they're doing and really take the time to stop and respond and rather than react. Because our first reaction almost always for years, because we were in these battlegrounds for years, so our reactions are bad. They're really bad, and they tend to not be our best sides. Even now that I'm sober, if I go into reaction mode, I go into something prideful or something, it's just not very well thought out. But if I stop to just think and respond, generally I can get to something that's much more encouraging and beneficial to my life,
And I can tell you, as a sibling of somebody who is going through the addiction, and I kind of likened it to being in a movie theater watching a horror story play out in front of you, and the person that is acting out the story and the main character is your family member, you love them, and you're just sitting there watching them, and it is just a very helpless place to be. And your story, I can tell you, if you had asked me, Russ, 5 years ago, do you think that Russ is ever going to get off drugs? I really think I would have said no. And that's just me being honest. I had gotten to a place where I was like, I'm just going to pray for him, and there's just nothing else I can do. And it really was a scary place to be for somebody. And I know there are listeners out there who have family members, who have friends, and that they're sitting there watching them a slow death.
Yeah.
And you just don't know what to do. Even when you try to help, you usually aren't helping. And when you do nothing, you feel awful. And you are just, it's just not good. And there's no good answer. And so Russ's story is what I call the biggest miracle I've ever seen. Because Russ, you're doing amazing. And I am so incredibly proud of you. And you take no credit for it. It's all Jesus. It's all
Absolutely.
the transformation in your life. And it wasn't like a mild addiction. I remember you were living by the train tracks, homeless.
Full blown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were squatting in empty houses.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want you to kind of help people understand the depths of where you come from with addiction, because that story helps to magnify where you are now, because it has been a very long journey.
We all say, if I could only get a job, if I could only get my life together, if I could only get a place to live. And I tried that. I did it. I got the car. I got the job. I got the place to live. This was the last time before going into recovery. And I lost it all in 3 months. It didn't take 3 months till I was sitting in an empty room, no gas in my car, no money, no food in the refrigerator. I had toast. It was the only thing I was eating was bread toast, and on methamphetamine. You don't eat anyway. But that was it. I was like, I had called Miracle Hill previous to that. Donna remembers. I end up in your driveway at like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, just totally messed up, didn't have nowhere to go, and was asking for help. And I came, and I understand the protectiveness. Like, here I am again, and
it was challenging.
Tough for y'all, and I know this.
We constantly messed up too. We didn't know. We're just trying to, like, what do you do? How many times have I handed you a number to call, and how many times have you been in a place where I had helped you go to somewhere, and then later you're like, that's not a good place for me, Donna. And so I was like, I don't know how to help you.
Yeah,
but
that's what makes recovery so hard. Because let's be honest, it's really hard to love an addict sometimes. We make you angry. I know it. I know. What really got me eventually was seeing my brother had been gone, and I just saw the pain in my sister's eyes. And it was enough of a moment of clarity to go, oh my goodness, my compass is totally off. I have no idea what to say and what's not to say. But I think that recovery, it's this, like I keep saying, it's this intentional thing with thoughts and everything like that, but it's this emotionally charged issue. So how do you take this thing that just rips your heart out and then turn it into this sort of like thinking, well thought out, so the two don't go together. The communication needed for a family to achieve recovery and stasis is so difficult to do, because it's just this emotionally charged issue. At some point my sister had to just wonder, why can't you just stop? Why can't you just, don't you love me enough? And I know these are just thoughts, but don't you love me enough to stop for me? Or don't you love yourself enough to see what you're throwing away? And none of it is logical, and so it's this really emotionally charged issue.
I can tell you too that I just want to say that the way that you ended up, Russ, at Miracle Hill, and this was what really changed in your life. That was the point, and it started happening for you then. Of course, Mom and I were tag teaming along the way in various situations, and not all of it healthy. Let's just say that. The relationship with you and Mom sometimes was tricky, and me and Mom was tricky,
Yep.
and then you and me. It was so strange, the
Yeah.
dynamic. But what I can say about all of that is Mom and I can take zero credit. We can't go, oh, it was because of what I did that got him there. So in some ways, God was bringing you to an end of yourself. But in the same exact way, he was bringing me and even Mom, who doesn't necessarily see through the same lens that I do as far as the impact of the change of Jesus and the Holy Spirit. She finally was like, I don't know what to do either. We had to get to a place where we were like, we can't do anything. There's nothing we can do. And everything we try usually backfires. And so it was that place where not only did you come to the end of yourself, but we came the end to ourselves as well. And not on the same page necessarily, her and I, but in different ways. And I look back and it just struck me that happened all simultaneously. So we're driving you to Miracle Hill.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of annoyed at you, by the way. I don't even remember. Of course, you were like, yeah, just get me there. I want to get away from you two anyway. There was part of that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
We were not loving each other.
Yeah,
but
it was, and the not knowing what to do, not knowing how to react to how it looked, and hadn't ate for days, and just lost. And I want to say something about what Young Gun had spoke about when you're in addiction, you're going to hurt that person in front of you. You don't want to, but it's going to happen. You're going to lie to them, the ones that care about you.
It's actually hard to remember sometimes, over. I think about these people with wonderful memories, and so I just realized I didn't even talk about the fact that I've survived overdose. I've died, so I definitely got into a heroin and intravenous IV drug use. You know what I'm saying? I mean, at some point, it's just all such a mess. Oxycontins and I very much have, felt what that cold grip of death feels like, waking up in the hospital and.
It's dark. It's so dark. What we did, the lying. I was talking to you about. I was never honest. I always hid behind things. You could never get the truth out of me. Donna, you tried. I wasn't going to tell the truth. I was filled with shame and guilt. Shame and guilt. So it just drove me to making horrible decisions.
Something they say at Overcomers all the time is recovery is done in community. And it's really true. It just can't be done any other way. You just have to. And if your community, of course, if you're lucky enough to have family, I mean, this is one thing that Russ and I, we thank our lucky stars for all the time, is because we've seen those guys who come in and the consequences of their choices in life is that they don't have anyone. Nobody. So they're starting completely over. Now, there's in some weird kind of way, God makes that pluses and minuses, but then the level of guilt and shame that they're dealing with, that they have children that want nothing to do with them, that on Family Communication Day, no one shows up for them so that they sit by themselves. Yeah. Or, on graduation, no one shows up to their graduation, it's this terrible, terrible thing that everyone in the United States and everyone in the world is dealing with. It's just like, I think we're kind of ahead of the curve just talking about this here because, this is what we need to do. We need to just start talking about it because it's coming. It's coming fast for everybody. Everyone will have to deal with addiction and addictive patterns, and whether it be you're addicted to likes on Facebook or whether you're addicted to drugs or whether you're
going to be a whole new thing.
Yes.
For this generation coming.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really that, this terrible form of idolatry of just that's something that's separating you from God is just putting, I don't know. And I don't claim to know anything other than my own experience on it. I know that God makes all things good for those who love him and to their purpose. And he's working in it.
There are places out there for those out there that need a place, that are hurting right now, there are places you can go to. Miracle Hill Ministries in the Overcomer Center only charges.
It's $125.
It's
$125
to come there for 7 months.
And if you don't have the money, don't worry. They'll actually work out a
you are
scholarship for you.
provided for. Clothes will be provided for you guys. Anybody out there that don't, I didn't have anything. I had a garbage bag when I came there. Some people have like little Walmart bags coming in, and they provide clothes, they provide food, they provide so much for 7 months, and then a transitional home you can move into. So there are places to go. I thought that I wasn't able to get help, and I reached out for people that didn't know how to help, and that's the discuss. I went to what I grew up in as Jehovah's Witness. I went to them. They didn't have any resources.
Yeah, you were a lost cause.
Didn't have any. That's what I felt. I felt
according to
exactly
them,
like there was nowhere to go.
They had nothing for you.
They had nothing for me. It was sad. They laid a Bible in the middle of the table. Never opened it with me. Which I was just watching the Bible, looking at it, going, share a scripture, share something. Instead, they said, well, what do you think the state could do? Can the state help you out? So, Donna, you helped provide the resources to me using the internet to find Potter's House.
Yeah.
We found Potter's House.
Yeah, they're 100%
Miracle Hill.
donation.
I called them, and I read the article about them and what was available, and I had some health issues. So at that time, they didn't have the resources for me and my high blood pressure, but gave me the number of Miracle Hill Ministries, and I called them. So I talked to Tim about how, Tim Brown's our director, I talked to him about how I got there. He stopped right there. It wasn't me, it was God saying, okay, you need to get out of Georgia. You need to get out of your familiar surroundings and be a stranger in Greenville, South Carolina, where you don't know anybody, where you've never used before, and restart your life over again.
So we have talked about where you've been. We've talked about where you are now. Right. And so where are you going? And I just want to share a great little mention that, young Ghun, you are going to be singing tomorrow at church, at our church.
I am.
We're excited about that.
It is a return to church.
Mm-hmm.
My first time I ever sang in church, I think I was in the 3rd grade, and it was this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, And there's this little part where it goes, on Monday, and he goes, he gave me the gift of love. On Tuesday, peace came from above. On Wednesday, told me to have more faith. On Thursday, gave me just a little more grace. On Friday, told me just what to say. On Saturday, told me to watch and pray. On Sunday, he gave me the power divine just to let my little light shine. So, sorry, that's a little ditty there. But that is one of the happiest moments I can remember in my childhood, quite honestly. And so to be back in the church, and honestly, I think I tried to sing for myself for many years, and I didn't enjoy it, not even one bit. But when I could share it and give it up to God, and
it's the good sauce, man.
Yeah. And so for me, this fall, I would be, so I'm in the process of finishing up my internship at Miracle Hill. I very much want to stay connected to Miracle Hill, so I'm going to try to probably find some job that suits me there. But this fall, I'll be going back to college for the first time in a quarter century. And the funny thing with God's provision, so on the way here, I just showed the tuition grant from since I got, there's a really complicated thing that happened, and I didn't finish high school, and so I had to get my GED. I got my GED here in South Carolina, but because of that, I qualified for a grant from South Carolina. So they sent me this letter between my federal and my academic and my different grants and tuitions and scholarships. I just found out that I have my entire tuition paid to go to basically the school that I want to go to in fall. This is a Christian college, and so that's kind of in my future. Education is definitely where I'm going next.
Yeah. What about you, Russ?
For me, there's a position opening up as full-time. It will be full-time transitional coordinator.
By the time you hear this podcast, my guess is you'll be in your first week or something of the job. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to be able to, when you're part-time in something, it's like you feel like you can't put your all in it.
That's right.
And so now I get to just jump into it and dive into it. And I'm also taking Christian counseling courses. I'm almost halfway done with how to care for people God's way. And so I'm fixing to complete that. I've also been put into the social media coordinator for the Overcomer Center. So I'm sharing stories through media, and I have one out now that I'm really proud of.
So, all right, young gun. All right, so you're singing Simple Gospel tomorrow at church, and I want you to take us out.
Lord, I've been told to be ashamed. Lord, I've been told I don't measure up. Lord, I've been told I'm not good enough. But you're here with me. You're here with me. Well, I will rejoice in the simple gospel. I will rejoice in you, Lord. I will rejoice in the simple gospel. I will rejoice in you, Lord.
Woo!
Yes.
That's awesome.
Beautiful, beautiful.
And that's a wrap. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you are struggling with addiction or know someone that is, reach out to the Overcomer Center for Men at 864-631-0088 or Renewal for Women at 864-242-2166. The New Wine team understands recovery isn't a one-size-fits-all process. Whatever you do, seek help. Addiction isn't something you can beat on your own. Find faith, find God, and be well, friends.